Okay, yo. Sorry for the shitty lighting. I'm not asked turning on my light. Uh, I also have another light. It's not working as well, so that's fucking annoying. So what I'm using my phone. Alright, anyway. In this video, it'll be a kind of part series, I'd want to say. Yeah, kind of part series, because what I'm going to do, so let me minimize stream modes real quick. You're going to see, obviously. Alright, let's look at the things. Chapters. Where the fuck is the chapter? Oh, there. Yeah. So you see, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Gonna watch chapter 3, then to 6, then to 9. So that's what we're gonna do in this video. In episode 1, fuck's sake. No, I'm just gonna turn on my light. Alright, that's instantaneously better, mate. Don't mind the TV in the background. It's shit. It was shit for some reason. Anyway. Yeah, anyway. Alright. Anyway, enough dilly-dallying. Let's get right into it. Fucking the doy.
Two universes, one filled with evil, flashing sparks of bloodlust all around. The other filled with a balance of good and evil, but evil nonetheless. A new start for an innocent family in the small towns of Hawkins, Indiana, with a small...
Okay, so if you don't know what Stranger Things is about, it's about an actual kind of... What is... give me a second. What is Stranger Things based on in your life? The Mutnock Project. And if you guys do not know what the Mutnock Project is, give me... Yeah, there's a Wikipedia page, right? Yeah, so it was basically thought to be where people... According to UFO researcher Jacqueline Veres, the Mutnock Project stories seem to have originated with a highly questionable kind of... Basically, it's about people have, like, you know, supernatural shit, basically.
fortune, Victor Creel had tried moving away from not only his recurring thoughts of the Second World War, but of his old life. A new start indeed, with his wife Virginia and two kids, Alice and Henry. There was something different about Henry though. He had a sense, some form of sense beyond our understanding. He never fit in with anyone. He was a sensitive child. Teachers and doctors described him as broken. Were they really so far off? After moving, Henry knew that it would be nothing different here than anywhere. He would be treated the exact same. One day he creates a bond and finds comfort in something others usually fear. And as the black widow spiders hiding within the bathroom vent, the apparent misunderstanding less important of the predators, providing structure for the weak. Henry grew this hatred, this hate of humans, specifically the civilization's structure of time and evolution. Eat, sleep, work, reproduce, then die. But he was able to control and connect with unheard of sense, realizing he didn't have to be a part of society's mindless play. He began to learn about his abilities, telekinesis, seeing into others' memories, creating hallucinations, and more. He tested these abilities on wildlife such as telekinesis on rabbits and other animals. He caused his father to hallucinate parts of memories, such as a baby born in a cradle, a memory from the war where he ordered the shelling of a building, thinking there were German soldiers inside, only to find himself horribly.
I was also going to record a cover or something, but you know, decided not to.
She somehow knew. She wanted to send him to a doctor, but nothing really came of it. But one fateful night, Henry decided to make his next move. While the four ate dinner, the radio glitched randomly. Victor got up to fix it until the lights above started to flicker. No one knew what was going on, that is, no one besides Henry. Virginia was lifted up into the air quickly. Crack, snap, and crack. Eyes burst, she falls down to the kitchen table as Henry's nose bleeds from the use of his power. Victor picks him up as they begin to run away from the house. Victor tries to slam the door open to free his children, only to be sent back to that cold day. He was back in that building, seeing and hearing that baby cry in that cradle all over again.
Dream a little dreamer.
He snapped out of his hallucination, his nightmare, only to turn around into a nightmare far worse. His daughter's eyes burst, bones cracked, and Henry himself on the floor bleeding out of his nose after knocking himself out, almost killing himself using too much of his power. He didn't quite know his limits. Shortly after, the police came to the house, arresting Victor for the murder of his own family. He took an insanity plea, leading him to be put into Penhurst Asylum. There, with nothing else left in his life, he comes up with a decision. An attempt at suicide, to cut his own eyes out himself and to join his family. But the people at Penhurst Asylum caused him to fail, patches stopping the bleeding, causing him to live permanently blind, sitting in the dark rooms of Penhurst Asylum for the rest of his years. But Henry wakes up slowly from his coma caused by the massacre, only to see Dr. Martin Brenner. Dr. Brenner was a part of a program named MK Ultra, a program designed to study and develop mind control, with operations taking place in Hawkins National Laboratory. And Henry was someone he was interested in testing on, someone his mother had mentioned to him in the past. Dr. Brenner takes him, somehow convincing everyone Henry died shortly after real.
My question is, how the fuck does the mother know about what's his name? About Brenner? Like in the play, obviously it might, explore in that, but like I haven't gone to see the play either. I haven't gone to see it yet. I want to do it, but like if it comes to Ireland, then I'm buying the tickets. If it doesn't, then I might just buy the tickets myself, or I might just watch it online. Simple. Alright, let's go back to it.
Awakening. He creates a device called Soteria to suppress Henry's abilities, not just his supernatural, but his literal ability to escape the lab. Dr. Brenner tattoos a designated number onto Henry, 001, beginning to include other students into the program, 002, 003, 004, and so on. He wanted to create these powers from scratch, and so he gave Henry the alias of Peter Ballard to become an orderly for the children within the Rainbow Room, a place to play around, testing powers on games, and more. In 1969, a woman by the name Terry Ives took part in MK Ultra under the supervision of Dr. Brenner. She was experimented on, mostly with the intake of mind-altering psychedelic drugs, but throughout her time in these experiments, she was unknowingly pregnant to her husband Andrew, who unfortunately died in the Vietnam War. Terry went into labor with Jane Ives in June 1971, but Dr. Brenner kidnapped Jane so he could experiment on her. He covered it all up with a miscarriage in the 3rd trimester, but Terry saw and heard the baby's life. So when she woke up to her sister Becky telling her that she's sorry for the miscarriage, she didn't believe it. She tries to get up and find him but gets put to sleep. But in 1974, Terry planned to return to her baby. She was going to take Jane back by force with a gun she kept in a safe. She went into the lab and after being asked for a badge, knowing she didn't have one, she aimed the gun at a security guard. She saw him reach for his gun and shot him. Terry went into every room she could until she saw a room with a rainbow on it, the Rainbow Room. She opened it and saw Jane and Carly, who was 8, playing in there. And as her child was finally in arm's reach, Terry was grabbed and pulled out by the guards. She was strapped down and forced by Dr. Brenner into a platonic state, turning her mind to mesh but keeping her alive. From then on, she would only know the words breathe, sunflower, rainbow, 3 to the right, 4 to the left, 450, with Becky becoming a personal caregiver. During the security breach within the lab and the Rainbow Room being breached itself, it seems as though 8 had miraculously escaped as well. 1979 was an important year for the town of Hawkins, and most importantly 11. Throughout the years, the numbers had been practicing how to do different things. For example, one thing they practiced was controlling lights with their mind. But throughout all these years and throughout all these practices, there was one common theme throughout them all. 11 would be the subject of bullying from the other numbers. They'd call her weak as she didn't progress as fast as the others. There was a catalyst of events that occurred this year, beginning with Peter talking to 11 about 1, and how he truly does exist no matter what Dr. Brenner says. Peter also mentions that Dr. Brenner, who the numbers call Papa, lies sometimes. He tells 11 stories about 1 and how he was able to use memories from his past that made him sad, but also angry, to help him find his strength. He asks 11 if she has a memory like that, and with no response, he mentions the strange woman that came to her one day, calling her Jane, who he reveals to 11 is her mother Terry, who she thought died giving birth. She realizes that maybe Papa lies after all. After that,
just in case, I will link, this video, obviously, because I want to, make sure I don't get fucking copyright striked. Oh, fuck's sake.
all the numbers play a game, another training activity, to stay in the circle drawn for the 2 numbers competing. The last person standing in the circle after all the numbers gets an extra hour of free time in the Rainbow Room. The first round was 2 against 6 and 2-1, then 2 against 5, 2-1, next 2-1, over and over and over, until it was 2 against 11. After Peter wishes her good luck, which makes Dr. Brenner suspicious, they begin. They seem pretty tight until 2 pushes 11 back, but she holds her ground. Dr. Brenner told everyone earlier not to use emotions as it will make them fail, which contradicts what Peter said to 11 earlier, but luckily she knows that Papa lies. She thinks about Terry, the only
Why is this being weird?
time she would ever see her mother in her entire life. This makes her sad and angry. She finds and controls her strength and pushes 2 out of the circle, winning the round. Dr. Brenner is now convinced Peter said something to help her, which during 11's hour of playtime in the Rainbow Room, he punishes Peter for. 11 sees him being punished and returns back to the Rainbow Room to avoid getting caught, but unknowingly to her, the other numbers are awaiting her arrival. 11 had embarrassed 2 in front of Papa. He was extremely mad. The cameras were turned off. This was happening after hours. 4 of the numbers use their mind to push 11 around the room, bullying her with their powers. After threatening 11 to never tell Papa about this, the other numbers return to their rooms. The next day, Dr. Brennan knows something happened and checks up on 11, and she stays true to the threat and tells Papa that she can't remember what happened. He gets all the numbers to line up to teach them about rules, the rules which Dr. Brennan knows were broken. Someone caused 11 a concussion. 2 makes the mistake, deciding to speak, calling 11 clumsy and stupid and that she must have just fallen. Papa makes 2 step forward and they collar him. He gives him a lecture about his rights and how the rules are the exact same as everyone else's and all apply the exact same. Papa shocks 2 to get a confession out of him, yet he keeps lying. Eventually, the numbers are sent back to the Rainbow Room and 11 continues to play her game by herself. The 3 numbers who helped 2 attack the other night stare at her. They are all angry that she technically caused 2 to get shocked and hurt. They mess up her chips, yet Peter intervenes by picking up one himself. He offers to play chess with her instead. He tells 11 not to change emotions no matter what he tells her because the cameras are always watching. He goes on to explain that 2 is doing fine and recovering, but as soon as he's released, he and his friends are going to try and kill her in the Rainbow Room, and that Papa will allow it to happen, that he's been setting it up in multiple ways. 11 is more powerful than the others, and Papa can't control her, which makes him frightened of her. He tells her that she needs to escape today, and passes her a card to get through the doors. Sometime later, all the numbers are still playing games. Dr. Brennan walks in after some time and asks 10 if he's up for some lessons. 10 uses a magic 8-ball to tell him yes, and so he grabs 10 away.
I remember watching this episode. Not the flashback episode, obviously, but the episode where Brenner, wakes up. He wakes up, goes to the place, does all the shit, and he sees 11, Elle, Jane, whoever the fuck you want to call her, banishing William to the Upside Down. So that's fun as fuck. Right, so like 52-ish.
This is her opportunity. She goes to the guard and tells him she's been feeling sick, so he takes her to the nurse who's currently treating 2, and tells her about 11 feeling sick, but as soon as he turns to face her, she's nowhere to be seen. 11 escapes into the saws, and after reuniting with Peter, she plans to climb through the saws which lead into the woods. After Peter reveals that he cannot go with her because of the device that weakens and tracks him, she says she can help him by pulling it out with her powers. He helped her after all. He deserves help from her. And she does exactly that, pulling Soterio right out of his body, which reawakens his true powers. Before they can begin to crawl away, guards find them and so they run away until they're cornered by the armed guards. Peter tells 11 that she doesn't have to be afraid of them anymore, as he shows her his true self. Henry's true power, one's true power, and he takes out all of the guards. He takes her into a supply closet and after showing her his 001 tattoo, tells her to stay put. She hears the alarms ring. She cannot stay put. She goes outside and hears on the dead guard's radio, people screaming and yelling. Something is wrong here. She walks around the lab and sees dead bodies everywhere. Not just of staff, but of the numbers. All the numbers are dead. She walks into the Rainbow Room and watches as 1 kills 2 with his mind. She attempts to run away, but he turns around and forces her to stay in the room with him. He talks over what happened in his past, the Creel House massacre, the creation of all the numbers, and more. 1 offers for 11 to join and escape with him, to help reshape and remake the world to make it better, but surrounded by the dead bodies of all her brothers and sisters, and previously seeing Papa on the floor, she uses her strength to say no and push 1 all the way to the wall. He gets up and they ready themselves to duel. A duel between 2 minds, a duel between 1 and 11, a duel between Henry and Jane. 11 tries to use the memory of her mother again to feel sad and angry to overpower him, but he pushes her down and around the room, eventually pushing her off the ground and doing what he did to his mother so many years ago. 11 remembers her birth, hearing her mother's voice, her mother's love, and she uses all the strength left in her to push 1 away and free herself from him. She continues to think about all the murdered children, all those innocent souls like herself, lives taken away, and she uses all the strength in her body, all the power in her mind, everything she has, and pushes 1 not through the wall, but through a gateway between dimensions, a gate into the Upside Down. The gate shuts and closes itself in. Dr. Brenner walks into the Rainbow Room with the gate now shut. He asks 11 what she's done, but 11 can't focus and faints. By using too much of her power, she sent into a coma, losing her memories, including her speech skills. Dr. Brenner sees the videotapes and learns what happened to Eleven and Henry. Henry falls through the landscape of the Upside Down, being hit by the lightning that surrounds its plane. He explores this new realm, seeing monsters running around. As he continues exploring, he sees a giant cloud of particles, a shadow that connects everything in the Upside Down, and he uses his powers on it, making it take a new form, a form of something he was obsessed with as a child, a form of a giant spider. This is his first of many changes to this plane, as Henry has no plans of dying so easily. Jim Hopper and his wife Diane Hopper had a daughter named Sarah. They ran around the park playing around until she began to hyperventilate. Hopper tried to calm her down, but sometime later it was discovered that she was diagnosed with cancer. She lost her hair and had to stay in hospital. Jim would keep a straight face for his daughter, but at the stairs close by, he'd cry knowing what's gonna happen to her. The cancer consumed her and caused the death of Sarah. Jim believes the cancer was caused by a squadron coming in contact with Agent Orange during the Vietnam War when he was 18. Mostly because after coming home, he and his co-workers would try and live normal lives and set up normal families, only for their children to be stillborn or born with deformities. After a while, Jim and Diane split up and Hopper moved from the big city and returned back to his old town, Hawkins. Within Hawkins, in 1982, Hopper's old school friend Joyce gets a divorce with her husband, Lonnie Byers. Lonnie moving away to Indianapolis and Joyce raising her two sons, Will Byers and Jonathan Byers, on her own, with Lonnie never coming to events and always making excuses. Back in Hawkins' lab, Eleven is breaking Coca-Cola cans. Slowly but surely, she's regaining her powers. Over time, they've been training her to become as powerful as she possibly can be. On occasion, she shows brief proof of this, such as when she kills two guards with her powers, or when she's able to listen to a conversation happening in a different room of the lab. As always, Dr. Brenner wants to push her to her limits. He puts her inside of a sensory deprivation tank to spy on someone far away from Hawkins, to spy on a Russian agent from the KGB to gain any form of information. But while inside the void, she loses contact with a Russian agent, only to find herself finding contact with something else. A monster growls at Eleven, and out of fear she runs away from the sound, begging the scientist to let her out. November 6, 1983, a day that will never be forgotten. Dr. Brenner sends Eleven back into the tank to make contact with the monster, telling her the monster cannot hurt her from wherever it is, that the monster is calling to her and wants her, so she reluctantly agrees and ventures into the void. She sees the monster and walks up to it slowly. She attempts to touch it, to make contact. And contact was made indeed. The monster screamed at Eleven, and out of fear she returned to reality, screaming her head off. Eleven uses her powers to accidentally open a gate to the Upside Down like she did years ago. This permanent gate opening has a major effect on the Upside Down, but without a moment's notice the lab descends into chaos as the monster enters through the gate, killing multiple people. Although amongst all the chaos, in a rush of adrenaline, Eleven is able to escape the lab through the pipes which Henry advised her about years ago. The monster also escapes the lab. Mike Wheeler, Dustin Henderson, Lucas Sinclair, and Will Byers are all playing Dungeons and Dragons in Mike's basement. They're all fighting the Demogorgon. Will has to make a decision between a protective spell or an offensive fireball. He chooses fireball but rolls the dice off the table. While the others look for the dice, Karen, Mike's mother, and Ted, his father, tell them it's time to pack it up and for his friends to go home as it's a school night. Will eventually finds the dice and it was a 7, which was a miss. Lucas tells him to lie to Mike about it as Dustin goes to give Nancy, Mike's sister, leftover pizza, to which she completely ignores him. Besides Mike, they all agree Nancy's changed after beginning to date Steve Harrington. When Dustin and Lucas leave, Will tells Mike alone that he truthfully missed and that the Demogorgon got Will. He leaves as the light flickers behind him. They all split off as they ride home, but as Will rides past the lab, his lights flicker and turns off itself. When the lights fix, Will looks back up on the road and sees a tall, shadowy figure turn to him. Will crashes his bike in the woods on the side of the road, and as he hears the monster growl from the street, he runs away through the woods, all the way home. Will locks the door behind him and yells around the house, wondering where Joyce and Jonathan are. He looks outside his windows only to see the figure followed him all the way home. He goes to ring the police, but the phone line is jammed and staticky. He only hears the slight growl of the monster. He looks at the door and sees the figure appear as it growls, opening the door on its own. Will drops the phone and runs outside to his shed where he knows a gun is. He scrambles to put bullets inside of the gun, and after loading it, he aims it at the door. The monster growls as it appears behind him. Will turns around and is frozen in fear when he sees the monster as the light brightens. The Demogorgon takes Will into the Upside Down. The next morning, Joyce and Jonathan realize Will didn't come home last night. She calls Karen to see if he stayed the night, but she denies this. She goes to the police station to report her son is missing. Hopper tells her not to worry, as 99% of the time, a missing child is with a parent or a relative. Hopper tells her to go and contact Lonnie, and Joyce asks that he just finds Will. Meanwhile, within Hawkins' lab, they shut off the entire east wing of the lab, quarantining and evacuating it. Dr. Brenner and other scientists investigate the area and find that the gate into the Upside Down is spreading into the lab, and they still don't know where 11 is. The missing 11 wanders the woods and walks into Benny's Burgers. She sneaks into the kitchen, eating some fries that were for other guests, but as Benny Hammond was returning from serving other customers, he sees her eating and runs in to catch her. But when he does, he realizes not only is it a girl unlike he thought, but she also has a shaved head and looked pretty beaten up. He cooks her a burger and asks her a few questions, especially due to how quickly she was munching down the food. Benny goes and calls social services about it, thinking she's either abused or kidnapped or something as such. But someone else was listening to the call and got 11's exact location. Mike, Dustin, and Lucas use a device called the Heathkit Ham Shack. Mr. Clark tells them that it can communicate to other parts of the world, such as Australia. While they're all having fun, they hear a knock at the door. Hopper interrupts as he grabs the other boys to talk to them about Will. They tell him that he might have gone down in Mirkwood. The three of them ask to help look for Will with the police, but Hopper shuts them down instantly and says they need to go home and don't go investigating on their own. Hopper and his team search the road they were talking about, and down the road's hill they find Will's bike abandoned. They go to the buyer's home to show Joyce the bike they found, and they begin investigating the house. Hopper goes and investigates their shed, turning their lights on and looking around. He sees the bullet pack open with a fuse spilling out of it. The lights break and he hears slimy movement coming from a cornered spot in the shed. He alerts the others to go and begin a search party. Jonathan and Joyce prepare missing persons posters, and Jonathan blames himself for not being there for Will. Joyce tells him that he's not to blame and for him not to do that to himself. They get a phone call and she hears only breathing and growling until she's electrocuted by the phone. Later in the day, Agent Connie Fraser arrives at Benny's. She acts as social services and shoots Benny dead. 11 runs out and the two guards come to stop her, but she kills them both as she runs wild into the woods. Mike, Dustin, and Lucas go and search for Will in the woods on their own, even after being told not to. They keep searching until they hear rustling in the woods and run into 11. They sneak 11 into Mike's basement, and after giving her some clothes for her to change into, 11 shows him her 011 tattoo and reveals that's her name, Mike nicknaming her L. After searching for Will the entire night, the police and volunteers still have no clues. Hopper arrives at the buyers and she tells them about the burn phone. Joyce tells him that she heard breathing, and not just any breathing, but Will's breathing. Hopper decides to go to Lonnie's because Joyce didn't hear from him. Jonathan also tries to go, but Hopper tells him to stay put. They all continue their search throughout the day. Mike goes to check on 11 and give her some food. He tries to get her to go to the front and talk to his mum so they can get proper help, but 11 says she doesn't want his mum to help, that she's in trouble with bad men who want to kill her, and will kill him as well if found. His mum yells as he has to rush to school. Jonathan hangs the missing posters at Hawkins High School, and after Steve and his friends give him a stare, Nancy goes over to him and apologizes for everything. Jonathan leaves the school and travels away from Hawkins to his father to hopefully find Will. Dustin and Lucas realize Mike isn't there at school today, hoping his plan didn't fail. Mike ended up sneaking home after his mom left so he can stay with 11. 11 explores his house, and eventually they get to Mike's room where she sees an image of Will and seems concerned. Karen arrives home early and hears Mike. He puts 11 in the closet before Karen finds her. Mike lies about feeling sick today, and Karen thinks he stayed home because of things going on with Will, that she's not upset with him staying home. After school, Dustin and Lucas come over and are confused why 11's even still there, and they all argue. Lucas suggests going to Mike's mum, but Mike tells him they might die if they do. But before Lucas can get out of the room and tell Karen about her, 11 uses her telekinesis powers to slam the door shut forcefully. Agents from Hawkins' lab heard the call to the police about the burnt phone and go to the buyer's home covering as Hawkins' power and light. But with none of the buyers home, they investigate the shed where they find material from the Upside Down. They know the Demogorgon is loose and might have taken Will. The police find Benny dead in his diner and it's been staged to look like a suicide. Hopper goes and interviews one of Benny's friends. With the information he gives, Hopper thinks that Benny's friend saw Will at Benny's, and at night they get the police to look around Benny's. And Mr. Clark finds a piece of clothing in a tunnel that leads directly into Hawkins' lab. But earlier in the day, and outside of Hawkins, Jonathan eventually arrived at Lonnie's. And Lonnie doesn't know where Will is either. Jonathan drives back home and searches the woods himself while taking photos. On the other side of the woods, Nancy and Barbara go to Steve's night party while his parents are away. And while they're all having a fun time, Barb accidentally cuts her hand on a can and she goes to Steve's bathroom. The rest party in the pool and scream having fun, which alerts Jonathan, who runs over thinking something's wrong. After the pool, Steve's friends go to his mum's room. Nancy goes upstairs with Steve and on her way up tells Barb to kindly go home. Upstairs, Steve gives Nancy clean clothes and eventually they kiss and begin to have sex. Barb, however, goes to sit outside, bleeding into the pool. Jonathan takes pictures of all these events, but while his camera reloads, Barb is taken into the Upside Down. Barb is chased by the monster in the Upside Down until she's caught and dragged into the pool. Back in Mike's basement, Eleven figures out which piece is Will's. She flicks the Dungeons and Dragons board upside down and places the Demogorgon piece on the board to demonstrate that he's hiding in the Upside Down and the Demogorgon is after him. They all plan to go and find the Upside Down as well as the Demogorgon. At night, Joyce's phone goes off and she hears breathing again. The lights begin flickering when he says Mom. The phone electrocutes again, but the lights flicker at specific points in the house, creating a path to Will's room. Should I Stay or Should I Go begins playing from Will's room. The lights flicker and intensify, only for everything to suddenly turn off and for the Demogorgon to stretch out of the wallpaper. Joyce runs outside of her house, but before driving away she hears the song come back on as well as the lights beginning to flicker more, so she gets out of her car and begins to walk back inside. Hopper and Officers Powell and Callahan investigate at Hawkins' lab, looking through the other side of the pipe, and after reviewing videotape footage discover that the employees are lying to them. The videotape they played to the police about that night as proof Will wasn't there had no rain whatsoever, but the night of the search there was rain. They go to the library where they discover the incident that happened with Terry Ives, but also that Dr. Brenner was involved in Project MK Ultra. Hopper thinks the piece of clothing from the hospital gown might belong to Will, and they might have gotten Will a part of it. He might have seen something that he shouldn't have, and been at the wrong place at the wrong time. Joyce hangs Christmas lights all over her house. Karen and Holly come to check up on Joyce, and while Joyce and Karen are talking, Holly sees the lights flicker and follows them to Will's room, only to see something come out of the walls. When Joyce picks her up and realizes she saw something in the walls, she kicks Karen out the house. Nancy went home sometime last night and discovered that Barb is missing when she's not at school the next day. Nancy has been looking for Barb all day, and when she goes to find Steve, she sees them picking on Jonathan. Jonathan is revealed to have taken pictures of the party and specifically Nancy. Steve grabs his photos and rips them up, and then he breaks the camera right in front of him. Nancy sees the photo of Barb and grabs more of the photo pieces, planning to put them all together just in case. During school, she goes to Steve's house to find Barb. She finds her car still there, empty. She goes into the woods to search for her, but is scared away from a strange noise and a figure running around. She goes straight home and tells her mum something bad might have happened to Barb. Eleven meets the boys outside of Mike's house at 3:15 like they planned. They walk in the woods and end up at Will's house. Eleven claims that he is hiding there, but they stop their search when they see a bunch of officers and ambulances heading down the road. So they get back on their bikes and follow them all the way to the quarry. A body that's claimed to be Will's is found there. The boys, Eleven and Hopper, all watch this unfold in front of their eyes. Mike gets super annoyed at Eleven, thinking that she's lied to them about Will being alive. Annoyed, Mike rides off all the way home to hug his mum. Will tells Joyce using lights that he's alive, but not safe. Knowing that he can communicate with the lights, she begins to write the alphabet on the wall so that he can use it to save. Knowing that he tells her through the lights that he's right here. But when she asks what to do, he tells her to run. When she realizes what the message is, the Demogorgon breaks through the wallpaper again, this time fully. She sees the faceless creature and runs out the house. She runs into Jonathan and they exchange a hug while the police are coming down the road to tell her the news. The police look around the house after Joyce tells them about the monster in the walls. She claims that the body is not Will's. She tells them about the monster she saw, the animal that looked human but without a face. After the police leave, she goes to the shed and grabs an axe, sitting on the couch, awaiting its return. She falls asleep until Jonathan wakes her up early the next morning to go and confirm it's Will's body. There, Hopper learns that Gary didn't do the autopsy, which he usually does, that someone from State did. Joyce and Jonathan see the body, but Joyce leaves angrily, not believing it is really Will. After a small argument about her lying to him, Eleven proves to Mike that Will is alive, as she makes contact with him through the walkie-talkie with her powers, hearing him singing his comfort song. Mike asks to stay home for the day, and after getting the boys to come over, and after a slight argument, they know they need a stronger signal to reach Will again as it keeps cutting out every now and then. So they give Eleven a full-on makeover, which Mike compliments, and go to the school to make contact through the AV Club's super radio. They get confronted by Mr. Clark and they lie to him about Eleven and why they want to use the radio, but they're successfully given the keys by Mr. Clark, but out of respect they go and attend the assembly for Will. Nancy tells the police about everything, like the party, and tells them that the figure she saw must have taken Barb. They basically create a story that might explain where she she's gone, that maybe out of jealousy of her and Steve she ran away. After Nancy and Karen go home and have a small argument, in her room Nancy constructs a picture she took from Jonathan of Barb, and after piecing it together she realizes the figure slightly. She goes to Jonathan, who's currently looking at coffins for the funeral, and she asks about the image and what it could be. She makes Jonathan remember and then realize that the faceless figure she's talking about is what his mum has been talking about the whole time. They go to the school's darkroom to help make the image clearer and find out that it truly is the faceless monster. Shepard, a worker at Hawkins' lab, enters the Upside Down through the gate to see what's really going on there on the other side, while being attached to a security line. But while inside he talks about how everything is still there.
Tiny bit. Just skip it to the into the
Mike doesn't
Get a fucking ad.
Dustin and Lucas try and locate the gate with their compasses thanks to Dustin's idea. The compasses are pointing in the wrong direction, but the only thing capable of breaking a compass is a large power disrupting the magnetic field, much like the field Mr. Clark was talking about the night before, so they begin their hunt. But to keep them safe, 11 distorts all their compasses to lead them in the wrong direction. Lucas realizes this and a fight breaks out between them, and 11 knocks Lucas out unconscious before escaping. After Nancy practices hitting with the bat and Jonathan with the shooting, they both realize that they aren't doing too good. They meet up and swap weapons to try, and Nancy takes a good shot. Nancy and Jonathan go searching for the Demogorgon. They find a bleeding deer suffering and plan to end its suffering, until it gets dragged away into the bushes. Eventually Nancy finds the gate and enters the Upside Down, seeing the monster and running. Jonathan yells to Nancy through the gate he found, and Nancy follows his voice and returns through the Upside Down as the gate shuts. After this, Jonathan sleeps over at Nancy's place, which Steve sees when looking in her window. The next morning, the two talk about what happened and the clues they have so far, and realize that the monster seems to be lured by blood. Nancy and Jonathan purchase weapons to kill the Demogorgon, and on their way back they see a sign saying Nancy is a slut. A fight breaks out between Jonathan and Steve because of this, Jonathan throwing the first punch, resulting in Jonathan getting arrested by the police because quite frankly he won, but also because he was the only one they could catch. Back at the Byers, Joyce and Hopper read the documents over and talk about it, and realize that maybe Terry Ives was telling the truth, and maybe Hopper had been following clues towards her stolen daughter instead of Will. So they track down Terry Ives and travel to her house. Terry's sister Becky tells them about Terry's involvement in Project MK Ultra, the isolation tanks, and her belief that she really did have a daughter, no matter what the doctors say. With not much information to take, they leave their house and are alerted to Jonathan being arrested. Agent Connie visits Mr. Clark's house and finds out about Mike, Dustin, and Lucas. 11 is going around into the wilderness and then into the city, stealing Eggos from shops and more while Mike and Dustin are looking for her, but this time not with Lucas. He's still annoyed at 11 and doesn't want to continue anything with the boys if they have to be with Elle again, and would rather go straight to the gate. So Lucas goes out on his own to locate the gate, and follows the false magnetic north indication to the lab, where he figures out that the Hawkins power and light vans that were outside of his house were fake, disguised by the lab. In the woods looking for 11, Mike and Dustin are spotted by Troy and James, and they run away. They're caught, and Mike yells for them to let Dustin go and not to cut him, but in order for them to do that, they order him to jump off the cliff. Mike decides to risk his own life for Dustin and jumps down into the quarry, but as he jumps he is caught by seemingly nothing, and is levitated to safety by 11. She pushes James to the ground and breaks Troy's arm. After the bullies flee and Dustin remarks that she'll kill them if they try and hurt them again, Elle falls to the ground drained and apologizes to Mike, saying that she's the monster because she opened the gate. Mike comforts and calms her down, saying that she's not the monster as she saved him from dying. Mike, 11 and Dustin hug. Mike, Dustin and 11 head home, but the actor from before sees them all and contacts other agents to come to Mike's house, and all the agents begin to gear up. Lucas saw the same vans that are now leaving the lab at Mike's house, so Lucas screams at them through the walkie-talkie that they know about 11 and are coming after them. They see the actor and then more vans incoming. After grabbing their bikes and 11 seeing Papa, they flee. They go to and reunite with Lucas, and as they chase down the road and a car approaches them, 11 flips over the car with their mind, helping stop the other cars from advancing. They ride far enough away and stop, leading to Lucas apologizing to 11 and Mike and Lucas to reconcile. The agents then head into Mike's home to find anything of 11's and to tell Mike's parents that Mike is in danger and to trust him, and for them to tell him where they might have gone. At the junkyard, the boys and 11 see helicopters are out looking for them. Hopper and Joyce arrive at the station, and after notifying them about the stuff they found in their car, Hopper asks to speak to them alone, and they all look through their proof of the Demogorgon. Hopper becomes aware of the incident with Troy, as Troy's mother went to the station and reported the girl, which Hopper immediately recognizes by Troy describing her head being shaved and that she has supernatural abilities, and that she hangs out with the boys. Hopper, Joyce, Jonathan, and Nancy leave the station, and on their way home they see the huge amount of agents at the Wheeler house, and they plan to find the boys first. They go to the buyer's house and use the walkie-talkie to communicate with the boys in 11, getting their location off of them. Vehicles approach the others and they think that maybe Nancy and Hopper betrayed them. At least they thought, until Hopper beats up the agents who arrived first and save the boys in 11. They all meet and talk about all the information they know so far, including the fact that Hopper knows where the gate is, and they all plan to communicate with Will and Barb, but 11 can't reach them with the walkie-talkies and they can no longer use the AV Club machine. But Hopper and Joyce remember the sensory deprivation tanks, so they call Mr. Clark, whose date they're rudely interrupting, and they ask how to build the tanks, and Dustin manages to convince him to tell him how. They need salt. Lots of it. So Mike, Dustin, Lucas, 11, Joyce, Hopper, Nancy, and Jonathan break into Hawkins High, and they all help in different ways to make the sensory deprivation tank for 11 to use, with Joyce giving her some advice and thanking her for all the help. She readies herself and enters the void. She finds Barbara dead and screams that she's dead to tell the others. Joyce calms her down, telling her that she's safe and okay. 11 calms down and channels her powers to find Will, and she sees Will, weakened in the Upside Down's castle buyers. And after telling him that they're coming for him and to hold on a little longer, he disappears in the void, and 11 wakes up as the monster approaches and finds Will in the Upside Down. Joyce and Hopper go to find a way to enter the gate through the lab, as Jonathan and Nancy plan to lure the monster to Joyce's home and kill it there, breaking into the station and stealing back their equipment in order to kill the Demogorgon and distract it away from Joyce and Hopper when they enter the Upside Down. But those two are caught breaking into the lab, and after interrogating Joyce and then Hopper, Hopper ends up promising to reveal 11's location, and that he'll never reveal to the public anything about the agents or the operations going on in their lab, but only as long as the agents leave the three boys alone and only deal with 11, but also that they're both allowed to go into the Upside Down and find Will themselves. Nancy and Jonathan set traps for the monster in the buyer's home and reload all their weapons. In order to lure the Demogorgon, they cut their palms. Unexpectedly, Steve arrives and thinks that Jonathan hurt Nancy because her hand is bleeding. But when he enters and starts wondering what all the equipment is for, Nancy aims a gun at him and tells him to leave now, until the lights begin flickering. They look around for the Demogorgon as it breaks through the ceiling. Nancy starts shooting it, but they all run to lure it into their trap, but it seems to disappear as the lights return to normal and the noises stop. Steve asks questions about what the fuck he just saw, but is told to leave one more time. This time he dashes away quickly with fear, but when he faces the house again and sees the lights flickering, he bravely re-enters the house, and before Nancy gets eaten by the Demogorgon after she saved Jonathan from it, he hits the monster with a bat and knocks it away. They get it into the trap and light it on fire, but as they check the trap again, it's disappeared. They follow the lights to the door, where Jonathan realizes it's Joyce in the Upside Down. Outside, Nancy asks where it's going, but Jonathan tells them it's not the monster. Justin and Lucas go look for food in the gym while 11 rests, and they find chocolate pudding. Mike and 11 talk, and he invites her to the snowball, and they kiss, revealing that they like each other romantically. The agents come to the school to capture 11 after Hopper told them about her location. Mike thought it was Nancy coming back, so he sees them coming, and warns everyone else about the agents. The agents find the pool and know that they're all here, so they search everywhere until they find all four of them in the hallway. They corner them, but 11 stares coldly into her eyes and kills them all at once, much like one did to those kids many years ago. Blood pouring out of their eyes. With a drained 11, the agents eventually grab the boys, and Papa grabs 11, but she tries to get out of Papa's hands and back to Mike and her friends. But the Demogorgon arrives, being lured by all the blood. It jumps through a gate, killing all the remaining agents, as well as seemingly killing Dr. Brenner. The boys pick up 11 and run into a classroom. They listen as the gunshots stop, wondering if it's dead. But the Demogorgon knocks the door wide open and heads towards the boys and 11. Lucas tries his best to knock the Demogorgon away and hurt it with his wrist rocket, but before it can harm the boys, 11 pushes it to the wall as strong as she could, like she did with one so long ago. 11's nose bleeds as she turns around and bids farewell to Mike. She then turns back to the Demogorgon and screams, using all the power she possibly can. She disintegrates the monster, but in the process disappears herself. The boys scream for her, but soon give up, knowing that she's gone for good. Joyce and Hopper enter the Upside Down in protective suits and find Castle Byers destroyed. They follow a trail that leads from the Byers to the public library, where they search, finding Barb and eventually finding Will with a long tendril down his throat, which Hopper helps pull out his throat and through his mouth. mouth. They get Will on the ground and Hopper and Joyce perform CPR on him, trying over and over and over, and eventually he begins to breathe again. Hopper puts one of the oxygen masks on him and they help bring him back into the real world, where he's brought to Hawkins General Hospital. Emergencies arrive at the school and everyone reunites with their parents. Will wakes up later in the night in the real world to see Joyce and Jonathan. He asks where he is and Jonathan tells him that he's home, safe, and then he made a new mixtape for him. Jonathan goes to get the sleeping boys and they all wake up and rush into his room and hug Will. They begin instantly telling him stories about what he's missed, but he coughs and they realize that he's still obviously hurt, and Will says the Demogorgon got him. But they say not to worry, it's dead thanks to 11, and they continue to share stories all at once anyways, talking about the events that passed and the journey they embarked on. Outside the hospital, however, Hopper is picked up by a government car.
That's what I hate, because in some shows,
Enter the Virgin Media Playhouse for unbelievable...
in some shows they refuse to fucking show that PTSD is an actual thing, which honestly I don't fucking get, because people will not come out and say, oh, I have this and I act and all and shit like that. But it's just annoying, because when TV show like for instance, Ginny and Georgia, right? A lot of people like that show. What else? Let me skip this and have this kind of playing in the background.
After defeating the Demogorgon, 11 awakes in the Upside Down at the same place she disappeared. She walks through the school and finds the Demogorgon's temporary portal he used to get to the school.
Ginny,
she walks through it, tests it. She uses her powers to make the gate bigger for her to fit through, and enters through it, coming back into the real world. She walks all the way to Mike's house and spots that the agents are outside still looking for her, and the agents give the Wheelers the stay quiet treatment as they try and get any information out of Mike. 11 sees him and they briefly share a glance through the window as 11 runs away and hides out in the local woods. 11 wanders the woods, killing a squirrel and trying to cook it for food. While cooking the squirrel, she encounters a random hunter. She knocks him unconscious using her powers and steals his coat and hat for warmth, and keeps running across the forest. 1 month after Will returned, it's Christmas Eve, and Mike, Will, Dustin, and Lucas play Dungeons and Dragons in Mike's basement again, and Will fireballs the Festal Hydra and wins the game. Jonathan comes down to pick Will up, and after he leaves and Dustin and Lucas begin fighting, Mike turns to the pillow fort he's keeping intact from memory of 11. He truly misses her. While leaving, Nancy stops Jonathan and gives him a gift and a kiss. Nancy and Steve gave Jonathan a new camera for Christmas. Hopper leaves the office early, taking a bunch of Eggos with him. He goes to a box in the forest and places the Eggo waffles in it. The buyers have dinner and Will excuses himself to go wash his hands. But within the bathroom, Will coughs up a type of slug creature and momentarily phases into the Upside Down, returning for a moment before
perfectly healthy 2-3 hours ago.
Lasting effects from his time.
An hour later,
11 discovers the box of food that Hopper has left for her and takes it. Hopper leaves food for 11 again, and this time she reveals himself to him. He's shocked but happy to find her there. He takes her to his grandfather's cabin and she begins living with him, and they refurbish it to become her new house. They set up things like Morse code and they set up traps in the woods so they know if anyone gets close. After cleaning, he creates some rules that don't be stupid rules. Rule 1, keep the curtains drawn. Rule 2, only open the door if she hears a secret.
See if I like it or not.
3, never go out alone,
genre is
especially not in the daylight. Throughout the span of the year, Dr. Owens becomes the new director of operations at Hawkins Lab. Will begins to have appointments at the lab so they can monitor for any lasting effects. But across the lab, they begin regular burning of the gate's original entrance, in an attempt to stall any of the Upside Down spread. Outside of the shady business at the they leave, Dr. Owens goes back to watch the scientists apply the heavy flame.
I feel like chapter 3 kinda isn't really a chapter
Dustin
I like.
and Lucas
really
stay outside the arcade to see if it's really her,
Max
and it seems as though the two are gaining a bit of a
the
crush
chapter
on Max.
I really like
Both of them see
is,
her and Billy arrive and they argue, and after watching Max play Dig Dug, they confirm she's Mad
chapter
Max.
6 and 7.
The Wheelers are having a yard sale,
obviously
and Mike
meeting
has to
Eddie.
pack 2 boxes himself, so he heads into the basement and begins
Eddie,
packing.
who
While
else?
down,
Eddie,
Mike uses
Chrissy,
his walkie-talkie
Jason,
and attempts to contact
Lucas,
Elle for the
hanging out with the popular kids for once instead of hanging out with
After
Mike,
Mike finishes, Dustin and Lucas contact
Will,
Mike and tell him
Luke,
about Max.
Luke,
After Mike deactivates his walkie-talkie, Lucas and Dustin split off and go
Dustin,
home. And Dustin hears random rattling
Dustin,
from inside
Mike,
the bin. Nancy and Steve
Will,
have KFC at
Elle,
the Hollands, and they hear that they've hired
and a lot of
Murray to
other
help
people.
find Barb. Nancy excuses herself and begins to break down in the bathroom because she knows
This
that no
scene-
matter how
this scene
hard
is
they
just
try
fucking
and how much money they
heartbreaking,
pay,
'cause-
they'll never find Barb.
But I don't know
Will
how
and
Natalia
Jonathan
Dyer
talk
actually
about
pulled it off.
Zombie Boy
Like,
and how
I would
everyone
love
treats
to go
him.
up
But Jonathan
to her
tells Will
and
that
ask
he's
how
right
in
and he's a
season
freak.
1
But
or
it's
2
okay to be a freak
when you
rather than
heard
being normal and lame. Within
when you
Hawkins
heard
Lab, though,
the-
everything seems to be
the
going off
passing
the rails.
of,
The back of
you
the
know,
bar is
Barbara
Will wakes up
or
and goes
the
to the
show.
bathroom. But while
How did you
washing
make
his hands,
yourself
he
cry?
hears lightning outside. He
How did you
goes
make
to his
yourself cry?
door,
What did you
seeing
channel?
red flashes through the
What
window
was-
as the
what-
door
what
opens
was
on its own.
your
Will
way?
gets goosebumps on his neck as he sees the Upside Down once again. He looks at the evil he felt at the arcade and sees a spider-like creature in the clouds staring right at him. Halloween rolls around and Hopper promises
Henry
Eleven he'll be home by 5:15 so they can watch scary movies together. He sees Joyce and they talk about what Will drew last night, a picture of the spider-like creature he saw, which they realize is a perfect match for outside. But Hopper tells her that they just need to wait it all out and he will get better. He then goes to the station and sees more pumpkins rotting, and Eugene thinks Meryl killed his props and everyone else's crops around town. Hopper goes to Eugene's and after seeing some form of goo near the dead crops, he starts thinking of the upside down, so they begin marking how far it goes into the woods from the farm. Whilst within the lab, a scientist ventures into the upside down and heads towards a satellite they have set up within it, which was causing the chaos last night since its battery got fried. He turns the battery back on and the controls return to normal. Mike, Dustin, Lucas and Will dress up as Ghostbusters and go to school. Dustin turns in fear as they all realize that no one else is even wearing costumes to school. Dustin and Lucas spot Max skating down the hallway. Later that day after class, they go and talk to Max and begin to try and impress her and ask her about going trick-or-treating with them. She doesn't necessarily say no, but she does walk away after the invite. On their way home, Billy yells at Max as they're stuck in Hawkins and she blames it on him. He drives quicker along the road and as they keep going, Max sees the boys riding home and tells Billy to slow down. He laughs about hitting them and getting a strike and Max turns the vehicle
Billy in
for
season
him,
2,
and the
I
boys
think,
get
was the
back
best
up,
Billy.
lucky they didn't get hit by the car.
Obviously, you know,
Mike, Dustin, Lucas and Will go trick-or-treating. Jonathan letting Will go on his own instead of tagging along. Jonathan heads to Tina's Halloween party, which Billy is absolutely showing off at, and when he sees Steve, Nancy
Billy,
leaves and goes to get drunk, telling Steve that they're meant to pretend to be normal teenagers again, so this is how she'll do it. The boys keep getting through Musketeers and walk along the street talking about finding better houses until they're jump scared by Max, and she joins them for trick-or-treating. Mike is annoyed about Max joining them for Halloween. He splits from Will when he slows down to think about the situation, but while briefly alone, Will is scared by multiple people and falls over with his camera. He looks up only to see the upside-down spores. He's back. He hears monsters lurking around and sees a giant shadow rise in the distance, staring at him and then moving closer. He runs down the stairs as the shadow follows him down, until he's grabbed by Mike and snaps out of his vision. Mike tells the others that he'll just take Will home and he's bored anyways, but the others can keep going. Will talks to Mike about his vision, about the new shadow monster that was coming for him, and they briefly talk about 11, and both agree that if they're both crazy, they'll go crazy together. At Tina's, Steve tries to stop Nancy from drinking more and accidentally gets it all over her. They go to the bathroom to clean it up and Nancy tells Steve that everything is bullshit, including her love for him. Jonathan sees Steve leave the bathroom and then the party, and goes to pick up Nancy and takes her home responsibly while she's drunk so she can go and rest. Hopper loses track of time and rushes home to the cabin after bargaining with the child for the Halloween candy. He tries to guilt trip 11 into coming to eat with him as she shuts herself in her bedroom watching TV, until eventually turning it into static to enter the void in order to visit Mike telepathically, who at the same time was trying to contact her through the walkie-talkie. He asks her to give him a sign if she's still there, and she does as he feels her presence through the void but doesn't see her, so he turns off his walkie-talkie and walks away. Dustin arrives home after a fun night trick-or-treating and hears the rustling in the bin again. This time the bin shakes violently. He goes to investigate and discovers the creature. He takes it inside and it shakes in his ghost trap. He tells his mum that he's just rigged it up to look like he caught an actual ghost. He goes into his room,
why
takes
did
Yodel
Dustin
the turtle out of
name
his
it
cage and puts the
Dartanian or
creature inside. He figures it might be hungry and that's why it was in the trash. So he gives it 3 musketeers and figures out that it won't come out if it's hot. He calls it D'Artagnan, or Dart for short, and Dustin studies creatures for a while before falling asleep, while Dart begins to shake and growl violently. The next morning, Dustin goes straight to the library and tries to order books about reptiles and other creatures, but he can only borrow 5 at a time, so he redirects her attention and steals the books from her. 11 is still upset at Hopper and he baits her out with an Eggo extravaganza. He knows she visited Mike last night in the void, and Hopper offers to go and check on him. They argue a bit about when she'll be able to leave properly and see Mike, and she pushes the table and slams the door shut with her powers. Bob takes Will to school one morning and they talk about him walking around last night and about his nightmares. He tells Will the story of Mr. Baldo, a clown that would appear in his nightmares every night. Every night he would run away from the clown.
From a certain Stephen King movie.
Stood his ground and yelled at Mr.
that
Baldo
Finn
to go
Wolfhard
away.
was on.
Lucas and Max start talking about what's going on with Will. In class, Dustin barges in and arrives late, telling the boys to go meet in the AV club at lunch and then Max, as his bag rattles. He brought Dart to school. Hopper and his officers put together their information on where they saw the rot stop, and Hopper figures out that all the ends make circles that lead back to the lab. Hopper goes and talks to Dr. Owens about it, that it's all spreading from the lab, and Hopper asks him to convince him that there's not a leak and they all got it covered, to go to every area on the map and do tests on it. Hopper tells Dr. Owens that he needs to keep his shit out of his town, and he needs to convince him that it's not spreading. While back at his cabin, 11 breaks all 3 of his rules. She ventures outside and sees a mum and her child, asking her where the school is. She uses her powers to distract the kid and then her mum as she walks away. At lunch, he opens the trap and they all meet Dart. They pass the creature around from Max to Lucas to Will and then to Mike. They talk about what it is. Dustin says he's researched all different species, but none quite match Dart, as if it's a brand new one. But while talking, they see that there's something moving within it and shine the light to it, and it gets scared and roars. After hearing this, Will remembers hearing its roar in one of his visions. The bell goes and they all talk about possibly showing Mr. Clark. Nancy and Jonathan have lunch and talk about last night at Tina's and then all the stuff that's happened. Nancy comes up with an idea to arrange over the phone to meet Bub's parents and tell them the truth about what happened to her and the monster. Nancy gives the location and time to meet up, but the lab overhears what she says. Joyce checks the footage from Will's attack last night, and after calling Bob, figures out how to connect it to her TV, and she begins to watch through it. She sees the bullies and then him falling over, and then calling for Mike, but also sees a figure in the recording static. She grabs paper and draws the figure, seeing that it's the same figure that he drew the other night. After learning AV Club was possibly cancelled, she heads straight for the school. Back at school, after the bell rings, Dustin is about to show Mr. Clark Dart, and clarifies that it's his discovery and not Mr. Clark's. But Mike rushes in and tells them that they need to go now. They go inside the AV Club, locking the door on Max so they can talk about it. Mike tells him that Will saw something like Dart last year, but also heard it in one of its episodes, and that maybe Will can somehow see into the Upside Down. The monster rattles in the cage, and Mike grabs the light to prepare to attack, just in case. Dustin opens the cage, and it grows legs right in front of them. It roars and Mike attacks, but Dustin stops him from hitting it directly. Outside, Mac picklocks the door, trying to get inside and see what they're talking about, and so Dart escapes and runs down the hall. After meeting with Dr. Owens at one of the sites, and showing him that they're gonna test it, Hopper learns that Eleven left as the mum called the police. At this time, though, Eleven's at the school and sees their bikes. She goes inside the buildings to find them, while all the group are still looking for Dart. Mike goes into the gym and runs into Max, and he and Max argue about her joining the group, and Mike accidentally spills about Elle. Max shows him tricks in the gym with her skateboard, and Eleven sees him having fun, and decides to use her powers to knock Max off her board. Max tells Mike about how it felt like a magnet that pushed her off her board, and Mike knows straight away that it sounds like Eleven, so he goes and checks, but sees no one. Will goes inside the toilets and finds Dart. He contacts the others about where it is, but Dart squeals at him. He drops the walkie-talkie and runs outside, only to phase into the Upside Down. He looks around and sees the shadow turn the corner and start to follow him. He runs as fast as he can, trying to outrun the shadow monster until he exits the school building. Dustin finds Dart before the others and puts it under his hat. Mike, Max, and Lucas come inside the bathroom and Dustin tells him that Dart's not there, but Mike realizes that Will isn't either. Will remembers Bob's words about Mr. Boldo, so he stands his ground as he watches the shadow rise from the school. He yells at it to go away over and over until the shadow attacks Will and goes inside of his body.
Easy peasy, right?
Easy peasy.
Just like that.
Joyce speeds to the school, checking the AV Club, learning he's not there. She hears Dustin calling out and looking for Will, and she meets with them. Lucas runs inside the building, telling them all where he is, as Mike and Lucas found him on the field. As in the Upside Down, Will is getting taken over by the Shadow Monster, and after the Shadow is fully inside with him, he instantly snaps back to reality. As Joyce takes Will home, the boys can tell that it's getting worse, as it's now 2 episodes in 2 days. Max, however, doesn't fully know what's going on.
Alright. Yeah, so that's gonna be it for today's video. I know this is a very fucking long one. Yeah, anyway, yeah, I know this is a long ass one. Like I said, this could be a series, like reacting to movies or TV shows. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, this has been it, man. Like, I love y'all. If my mic will just go into my mic sound. I love y'all. Born of Thorns, baby.